So I'm on this foreground head layer, and I just added these black lines back in using the pen tool. You can use stroke path. I'm going to delete this path. Of course, you can also go in with your tablet and just touch it up, like along here. So now let's go to the layer behind it, and we'll call this rear head. See, we're not on that layer. There it is. And for this, I'll just use the smudge tool so that it goes in behind everything. Grab more of it once. Then we can go ahead and use our airbrush tools and other tools and just kind of touch this up so it looks a little better. So using Alt to do color picking, square brackets to scale your brush. We'll use a soft brush, and we'll set the opacity way down so you can just gradually work this detail in. Actually, no, we'll start with it high. And just keep hitting Alt to grab color. And seeing as how most of this won't be seen, it doesn't have to be perfect. Plus, it's going to be scaled back quite a bit, so okay, so what I did here was I sort of used the eraser brush with the opacity turned down so that I could sort of blend in this into what's behind it a little bit. And if we toggle the rear head, I pulled this down and then used the opacity brush again. Yeah, we don't have to erase this stuff if we don't want to, unless you plan on not having eye whites. So turn on your eye whites layer, bring them up so that it's in between, and we'll fill in these eye whites. So if the eyes move around or anything, it'll look correct. You won't have these strange images behind it. So I'll leave this in the background so I have some general idea how far I can go. So first we'll create an extra layer over top of eye whites, and we'll use that to fill it in, and then we'll merge the two layers together. And since these are eye whites, none of these black lines should show up. The black lines will be in the head art as well as in the inner eye parts themselves, so we don't have to worry about maintaining those. So using the ellipse tool, I just dragged out this white right over top of it. You can put that behind to sort of see where it is. And I'm using a white fill and a black stroke 4.5. We'll do another one over here, kind of approximating. We'll rasterize those layers and merge them together. So let's see where the head is. Okay, and we definitely don't want these to come out from here. So what we'll do is we'll just erase those parts because they should actually be inside the head, because if I put this here, it doesn't work. So click on the new eye white 2 layer and use the erase tool, turn the opacity up. We'll get rid of anything along here. Turn the opacity down a bit. Now I'd like this to go right across here. Make sure you're on the correct layer first. Control C, and we'll paste over top. And we can use this thing here to kind of warp it. Okay, and then once you think it looks okay, you can hit the selection tool, hit apply. Do the same thing to the other side. Let's grab a section from here. Control C, Control Shift V to paste in place. You just click on one of the corners, click on this tool here for the warp mode, and we'll stretch this out. Just to speed things up here a bit, I went ahead and used an ellipse to make the line go across. And I'm going to use a gradient fill, so I'll just select this area and use this gradient bucket tool on a different layer. Okay, I've got the selection. I'll put gradient. I'll make something that matched what I had before using white on this side. Opacity, 100%. Yeah, this should be 100%. Okay. Okay, that's pretty close. Okay, now I can just go ahead and use smudge tools, paint tools, merging and stuff to just kind of blend this all out nice and smooth. You can also use Gaussian blur and stuff like that just to smoothen this all out. So I just went ahead and used the smudge tool to smooth this out a bit, and I'm going to kind of blur it together. Make sure to erase part of this too so it doesn't stick out ever. Looks like I accidentally put the gradient on the ellipse layer, so I'm just going to draw this ellipse back over top. You can use the selection tool and then the adjust selection to get the exact shape you want rather than the ellipse tool itself, and then you can stroke the path based on a brush that matches what you want. Use Alt to get the color, solid brush, full opacity, and a matching size. Use square brackets so then you can go stroke path about 14, maybe 15 pixels. Then we can go into the other layer and just kind of grab colors and touch it up, make it match. Let's trim off the excess from the ellipse here. Then we can go ahead and use a white brush and start getting rid of this. And the eraser tool, and we'll just kind of get rid of some of this excess here. And we can double check that with this. Make sure this doesn't stick out if the eyebrows move at all. You don't want it to stick out. But there's other ways of moving the eyebrows so that you don't have to worry about that. I'll show you how to do that later. I relabeled this layer here with eye white, and we'll go ahead and we'll start on the right eye white doing the same sort of thing. So like I said, you can use transform selection of on the lips to get the shape that you want. Then make sure you have the brush you want and right click and go stroke path once you have it set up. And that might be a bit big, so we'll bring that down in size. Oh yeah, make sure you do that on a different layer. You don't want to do it on the other one because you'll corrupt your results. So just double check that sort of thing. You can right click and hit reselect to get that area again. And then we can create another layer under it and paint underneath of it. And there's not really any detail on this side. You could probably just get away with just filling this in with this color. I realized I don't have both eye whites separated, so I just changed this to eye whites layer. And we'll blend this out onto here just by painting over it. Okay, so I just smudged some of this out a bit. None of this is going to be seen generally, so the detail doesn't have to be perfect, obviously. Okay, so let's grab whatever is left over that we don't need and just chop it off. Using an opaque brush that's white, let's clean up these lines here. Okay, let's see how that looks. And you just got to plan for when things move around how it's going to work. There are other ways around that, like I said, where you just have different pieces swapped in and out. So let's clean up these layers, merge whichever ones we need together so that we got it all into the eye whites layer. I'll hide that layer for now. Okay, now we got a single eye whites layer. Okay, using the smart selector, we can select this part of the left eye and delete. And let's use this to get rid of this bit that it didn't get rid of. Let's expand this so that when the eye looks around it will look more normal. To do that, let's transform on the lip selection and let's create a new layer for ink for the left eye and correct brush for it. Actually, I think we can specify how we stroke it in here. That might be a bit thick. Okay, I'm just going to adjust this selection transform a bit. Maybe we'll go with 9. On second thought, let's go with 11. Okay, and then we'll start a new layer under that, and we'll sort of copy and reflect this eye. We'll edit it using distortions, for example. Let's copy this, duplicate layer. So I got another layer over top here. So I'm just going to delete that extra layer that we don't need right now. And we'll transform this. We'll have to fix the ink here though. This is not quite the right shape. My ellipse is a little too big. There, that's better. The whole idea is to try to get the pupil so it's more in the center, and we'll be doing that with the rest of the eye too. I'm just going to hide the original left eye so we don't modify it, and I'll just erase this part up here and the copy of it, and I'll just use smudge to push this out a bit. This way the eye is actually round now. So I'll make a copy of this, another copy, duplicate layer, and we'll match up with what we have here. So I made another copy layer. I turned the opacity down to 50% so I can kind of see where it is, relatively speaking. And the pupil should be a little bit to the right because it's kind of looking that way. So we actually do have it in the right spot. We'll have to use distortion, so it kind of has that more perspective effect where this side of the eye is actually starting to wrap around. I'd have to stretch this. I'm trying to get these to sort of line up, so that's pretty close. Click selector, click apply, and we'll change the opacity back to 100%, and then we'll grab our erase tool, and we'll just blend this by changing the opacity on this side. Need a stronger eraser. Oops, don't want to go too far. Okay, well, with a little bit more fine tuning here, I can sort of fill this in so I got this whole space filled in properly over top of this because the shine is where this circle is. Same with this one. So we don't need that black line in there, and we can have that sort of blue blend going over top of this. So I'm going to grab the stamp brush here and we'll sample from here. And I'm not going to use 100% opacity just because I want to kind of see what it's doing as I do it. Another thing you can do is you can simply just copy out a little piece, rotate it or stretch it or whatever you want to do with it, put it in place, and then use the erase tool to just kind of blend the edges of it. And you can use the smudge tool too to kind of stretch it out more and get it to kind of fit together better. And we can do that kind of patchwork to the whole eye here. We want to straighten this part out more and fill this in with some detail using the similar technique to how I originally painted it. I'll just use a lot of dark colors and some blending, the stamp tool a lot to try to blend this sort of pattern through here over top. Okay, so I'm going to brush settings here, change it down to 20%. I'm going to use darken, color blue, and so you can see, brush just kind of blends across and makes it look kind of like how it did before. You can also use like linear dodge, which creates some neat effects. Better when you use this. You can create a ring around here. We'll select inverse, so now we can only paint outside the circle. Okay, I'm going to change the size of it so that now it's a little more inside it where the pupil is. And I'm going to go Control-Shift-C, Control-Shift-V to paste the pupil in place and use a blending option on it for inner and outer glow. I'm going to use normal so it's not adding the colors together, it's just going right over top of them. And we'll use the color picker to pick what color we want to use. And we'll do the same sort of thing with the outer glow. Adjust the colors there. The blending mode, size, range is the range of where it starts to fall off. And the spread's the same sort of thing. I mostly just mess around with the range and the size. Oh, and the opacity too, how strong it's going to be. I usually put them at 100% opacity. Normal will give you a more saturated color, but you can do other things here too for other effects. Screen will kind of add the colors together so you can get like a glowing or a brighter effect. So in my blend mode for inner, I added these gradient values, this for opacity, sort of red here. Gave this a little bit of see-through where it starts. I used a 4-point gradient to get this outer glow the way I wanted it. And I'll just do a few touch-ups with the smudge and some painting, maybe an overlay for texture. I actually just redid the pupil here, just because I realized that afterwards I'm going to do a couple overlays and use the darkening brush up here. So this should all blend in nicely after. So we'll select the whole eye here first. We'll blend this up here, and we'll do like a rough blend of this down first, and then we'll just fix it up after if we need to or want to. Actually looks pretty good. I'm just going to use a darkening brush. I'm going to create a bit of a misty effect using this dark purple by going across here. Just going to use a darker brush going over top of here. Actually, I might want to try this. And we're going to multiply. So that shadow from the eyelids kind of falling into here. This might be a bit darker than it needs to be, but I think it looks fine. Okay, I'm going to hide these two. So that fixed it up quite nicely. And we can add an overlay over top of this to get this to look a little more wet. At first I'm just going to touch up this background part. It looks a little crooked. We'll go into liquify. Make sure you're on the correct layer. We can use these tools to straighten this out. Okay, so I adjusted the shape of the ellipse here. So I got a better idea where this should go down to. If we wanted, we could even use smudge to adjust this. So sort of a combination of going back and forth between liquify and smudge. And there we go. And we could add some texture using an overlay, but I think this looks fine. First, we'll show the head again. Make sure to merge your ink and other layers with your left eye so that everything that it's made of is all together. So now when the eye moves around, it looks a little more natural. Although I feel that some of this shine should actually move with the pupil. Okay, so I took part of this shine, made it a little transparent, stuck it on the head, and then put part of it on the eye itself. I don't know if that was really necessary, but I think it looks a little better. So he's looking down, looking up. Okay, and then we can go to the right eye. So I'm going to hide this copy here. Okay, we'll use the ellipse selection tool, transform selection, get it to kind of match up, and we'll get everything to fit into this space. Quick and easy way to do it, I just copied this one over to here and then changed it so that it fit that shape. I'm going to try to blend it in with the original artwork though, to try to give this eye a slightly different look, like it's getting more illumination. Okay, so I just distorted and mixed a couple layers, copy of this over here, and blended and colorized so that it's like the original. And I think it looks pretty good, reasonably good up close. At a distance it'll look better. So I just got to merge the layers together for the right eye, and I'll keep a backup copy in the HID folder. So I merged the two layers, and you might want to change the names of them to right eye old and left eye old so that you can change these to just left eye and right eye. You may have it algorithmically decide how to move things based on their name, based on a hash. And later, if you know that you want the eyes to always move in the same way, you can either connect them using bones in MeoMotion so that they'll always move together, or you can just merge them as eyes in general before you export. I like to have control over both of them so I can make them go cross-eyed and do other goofy things. If you want to test it out, hold down Control, grab both eyes at the same time, you can move them around. And we get a problem when he looks up like this. You can see it coming out the top here. So we're going to add part of this green from the back part onto here for the front part so it covers it up. So we'll just do that real quick. We'll just select this region here, hit Control Shift Copy so it'll copy everything it sees. Go to the head layer. We'll hide the rear head for now. Make sure head layer is selected. Okay, paste in place and it looks fine. It's going to fade out the top of this in case the back part of it is doing any bending or anything. And then we'll grab those eyes and test it out again. So Yeah, he can look up, look down, look left. If he looks right, it comes out of his head a bit. And that's when you take advantage of the distortion capability in MeoMotion so it doesn't pop out of his head. Another reason why it'd be good to keep them separate. Okay, I merged the two layers for the head together. Just going to relabel that. I labeled the original copy of the ear as old. I'm just going to drag that down to the head folder as a backup. We'll just call this near ear. And that would be behind the head. We're going to put it up in front so we can see where it's going to blend in behind this. Just grabbing the smudge tool. And the paintbrush tool, just kind of touch this up. And I'll grab a solid black brush here and using the pen path tool, and I'll stroke that. This is on a different layer, using 34% opacity to erase. It blends together. And then I'll just use the erase tool here to make it kind of fade. Okay, we'll move the near layers that, oh, we forgot to merge that ink. So I'll just bring this down, merge it down. Okay, now we'll go up to the far layer and do the same sort of thing. Select only from this layer, copy it, paste it in place. We'll use the filter for liquefy, and we'll just pull this down. Yeah, we might want to preserve some of this a bit, so. Okay, with a bit of smudging and some airbrushing, or some painting with a soft brush and opacity turned down, using Alt for sampling. Turn on the rear head. And we'll merge that with the far ear. So merge down, and then we can put that behind the rear head. So now, should be able to rotate behind there. Well, obviously it's going to pivot over here. So you can rotate like this, and it should work quite nicely. So that's it for the head, other than facial expressions, which we'll get into later, but we're going to move on to the body next. Okay, so I created a new folder here called Head Setup, and I'm just going to drop these, which belong to the head, into there, and then we can hide that for now. Then we'll take a look at the body of the character using our copy here. First we'll grab the body section itself and isolate it. Okay, once you kind of have a selection around it, you can hit Control-Shift-C, grab from all layers, Control-Shift-V to paste in place. And once we start to separate the different pieces and build up the limbs, we'll have a better idea of how to fade or modify each piece. Next, let's grab a copy of that overlapping arm. Control-Shift-C, Control-Shift-V. I'm just going to use a little bit of smudge here. I'm going to use the eraser tool, turn the opacity down. Okay, that should be good. For a lot of games you might not need the arm to bend, but it's nice to have the option available, so we're going to make it so you can bend the arm. So we'll go to that arm, use an ellipse selector. So bend it somewhere around here, so it bends right here. And this will be a layer that goes over top, so it can go in front. These layers that go over top, you don't really have to stretch them out too much. It's the ones that go underneath that are the ones you have to worry about more. So let's look at the layer underneath that by comparison. We'll on a selection, we'll transform this. I'll squish this down a bit. Somewhere in there. And then we can use add and add this part too. So let's turn off that other layer, this one, top one, and go to this base layer here. Select inverse, delete, deselect, and this is the one you want to stretch more. So that way, when it rotates, it'll look a little bit more natural. And that's before having to use distortions. So use a black solid brush, 0 opacity, select P for pen, or just select the tool. And we'll put this on a layer under it. Stroke that path. Let's adjust that a bit more. That's about right. Same thing to the other side. Okay, and then we can adjust this layer with a bit of smudging. Smudge these black lines a bit if you want. This will generally be hidden here. And a lot of this can be fixed with the distortion, like I said before. Merge the ink together with it. There we go. We'll test that out. Okay, and you can see it shears a little bit, but the distortion will fix that. And another way you could reduce this so you don't have to use distortion at all would be to actually have this layer have been the one underneath and this one have been on top. But because of the way we might want to do things, I decided to put this one on top instead. For the other arm, we'll probably do it the other way. And I don't think we're going to animate the hand individually, but it might be nice to be able to swap out the hand with other hands. So we'll just make it so it's possible. Transform selection, copy and paste in place. And using the same technique, we'll just kind of fade this out a bit here, stretch it a bit. Then just make sure only this layer is selected, and we'll select this section here. And select the inverse, deselect. Duplicate this layer, reselect on the new layer, and make sure inverse is selected. Okay, make sure only the one layer is showing too. Once you're sure you're on the correct layer and only that layer is showing, and you have the inverse of the ellipse selected, you can hit delete. And we'll fill this in up to here and sort of get the stump here. We'll just erase this part here. Oh, we've got to select inverse again. Use a solid eraser. And I'll just blend this color into here. Let's just use smudge. It's so much easier. And most of this stuff back here is not going to be seen, so nothing to be too worried about. Let's use a burn pen tool, and then pen the other side too. This might not be necessary, it's just a formality, because that way if it bends and you're not using distortion at all, you got that black line kind of coming in behind it. So we'll just test that out. Looks good, even without distortion. Okay, so we don't need this layer now, so we can put that in the hid folder. So we'll call this left bicep. Technically it's his right, but we're going to do it backwards this time. Left forearm, left hand 1. And I say 1 because we may put in different hand expressions, like a closed fist or something like that, depending on if we want him to do anything extra.